Today we'd like to speak about coming back together and being reconciled, first to Christ and then to someone else, maybe in a marriage or in a relationship or at your job. It's time to be reconciled to Christ, as Paul in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 18 speaks about this ministry of reconciliation. To be reconciled, it is to return back into favor, or to receive another back into favor. Be ye reconciled to God. We have received also a word of reconciliation. That's 2 Corinthians 5:19. And he says in verse 20, we are ambassadors for Christ, be ye reconciled to God. It reminds me of a story that happened between a husband and wife that were separating. And they had tried to make up, and they had went to psychiatrists, and they were trying to bring their minds together, but they couldn't. They went to everything they could think of, but they were fussing, and they continually were divided. They just couldn't stand one another, and even to live in the same house or be in one another's presence. So they decided they would get a divorce. So they hired a lawyer to give them a divorce, and they said, well, before we do, we'll sell the house. We'll sell the place. And the lawyer said, you better go down and go through all the spoils and things before the divorce is finalized. So the husband and wife went down together. They went to the home. They went into the living room, and she said, I'm going to take this. And he said, I'm going to take that. And they fussed and they stewed and they carried on with one another. After a while, they went into another room, into the parlor, then into the kitchen. They said, I'll give you this if you'll take that. And all the fussing and fighting as they divided their spoils with one another. They went to the bedroom and the same thing. Finally, they remembered there was some stuff in the attic. And they went up into the attic and they pulled out an old trunk. And as they began to lay different things out, one said, well, you can have this and I'll have that. And finally, both of their eyes fell on a certain little object, and they both grabbed for it. And they looked at each other. What was it? It was a pair of little white shoes that had belonged to a little baby that had passed away, that had deceased. It was part of both of them. And with their hands clasped together like that over the baby's face, over the shoe, what was it that whose was it that it belonged to? It belonged to both of them. The tears began to run down their faces. And in a few minutes, they had divided up everything else. But when they found something that was common between both of them, they realized it was in heaven. Then their fuss was over. And in a few minutes, they were back into each other's arms, and the divorce was settled, and peace reigned. Today, be ye reconciled back with someone else, reconciled back to Christ. Come back into favor. I just think it's amazing that a couple that could be fussing and fighting and quarreling, that just a little shoe of something that had happened in their lives together could bring them back together, and the divorce was annulled and it was all over. Today, let us move from strife back into harmony. Let's move from fighting back into oneness, from separation back into togetherness, from being against to being for, from being down, let's go up. A time from hate, let's move into love. Today is the day to come together and to be reconciled, first to Christ and then with someone else.